Welcome to another video in my van build series. In this set of videos, I'm going to tell you about my flooring strategy and show you how that came together. I'm breaking this series up into two videos. There was a lot of time and effort that went into installing the floor. There was a lot of prep work that went into the different layers. So this first segment in each video, I'm going to talk about the details of each of the layers, and then stick around to watch how that came together, and I'll tell you about what's in each part as I get to the end of the details of the floor. So the floor of the van has these corrugations in the metal. Don't have really a better word for it, and it's often referred to as corrugations. They look a little bit different than the ones that are here next to me. They're a little bit wider, different dimensions. But what you need to know is that an important part of building up the floor is to first fill those corrugations and create more of a flush surface. Don't want to leave any air gaps, and want to fill that with insulating material. So for my first layer, use this minicell closed cell foam. So this comes in a few different thicknesses, and this particular thickness that I used is the exact height of those corrugations in the metal floor of the van. So this is my base layer that both acts as a sound deadener as well as an insulator, and then give me a flush surface to build up on top of. For my second layer, I used an extruded polystyrene foam. The foam I went with is 1.5 inches thick, which gives me an R value of 7.5 for the next level of my flooring. And you can see that flooring here. This gives me a really good base to build on top of with my subfloor and everything else that came after it, which I'll talk about here in a second. But what this does is also gives me a lot of R value for the space that it takes up. I've seen some other builds use a thinner extruded polystyrene foam, XPS foam, and they come in different brands, and so the color may be different. But I've seen other builds use a thinner foam instead of an 1.5 inches. I chose to go with 1.5 inches, mostly because I don't plan to have a permanent heater installed. So for the places where I'm going to be where it's going to be a little bit colder, I want to have the best insulation possible from all sides of my van, including the floor, to just make it a little bit cozier, and again, for those really deep winter conditions, be able to live and not need as much permanent heat as some of the other builds that I've seen. Now, heat does rise, but if I can prevent the heat from entering the van from below, all the better. For my third layer, I used a 1/2 inch thick marine grade plywood. Now, the reason I used a marine grade plywood is that the adhesives are better rated to handle moisture. And now I'm doing what I can to make sure the wood won't be exposed to moisture, but it will just make sure that the wood itself is more resilient to the changes in condensation and conditions that I'll be living in. Using plywood for this third layer also gives me a structural layer that I can secure my build to from the inside as I build up the rest of my structure. For the last layer of my floor, I finished off with a sheet vinyl. Now, I really like the sheet vinyl because it's a relatively neutral tone, but it still looks really great, and it's going to hold up to anything I could throw at it for the life of my van. Now, in this first video of my flooring series, watch as I clean the floor of the van and prep it for the install of the rest of the floor, as well as install the first layer, the minicell foam, and the second layer, my XPS foam. The first thing I do for the floor is remove the old cargo liner and clean the metal floor. You don't see the part where I used an enzyme cleaner and some towels to scrub the floor by hand to get as clean a surface as possible. For my first flooring layer, the minicell foam, I had to go through a tedious process of carefully measuring and cutting out all the pieces. Some of the corrugation gaps were the same width as others, but there were a lot of different widths to cut to. I even took care to cut around all the different features in the van. This process I don't have video of, but know that I was working in too many spaces to get great shots, and I didn't think the work was that interesting. I laid out all the foam in the final locations before I started to glue down any of it. To adhere the foam to the van, what you see is me pulling up sections of the cut and laid out foam, and then spraying the base with 3M 90 adhesive spray. Once the spray gets tacky, I press the foam to the floor for a tight seal. After some setting time, this first layer is good to go. As you can see, I take the foam layer all the way to the rear doors. After adhering the minicell foam, it was time for the XPS foam layer. Cutting the XPS was pretty easy, using just a box cutter and some patience. I used cardboard templates to help get the cutouts for the wheel wells right. Here you see me using GE Silicon 2 and then laying down the foam. I lay down the plywood temporarily to be able to stack some weight on top of the foam for the best level of adhesion for the XPS layer. Thanks for watching part 1 of my flooring for my van build series. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. And descriptions of the products I used, the materials I used, and a little bit of more of an estimate of how long it took me are all going to be in the description as always, as well as the links to my site and a few other places you can find out more information. So please stay tuned for more videos that are coming out, and especially please check out part 2 of the flooring series where you can see a little bit more of how the top 2 layers came together.